Today's guest is Jeremy Gilley, MBE, founder of Peace One Day, the organisation behind United Nations International Day of Peace on September the 21st. What began as a film project grew into a global movement, engaging governments, NGOs, corporations, educators, and more than 2 billion people worldwide. It's incredible. Jeremy started his career quite differently as an actor and filmmaker. He didn't come from politics or diplomacy, yet he spent the last 2 decades sitting across the table from heads of state, military, leaders, and global brands, building alignment in rooms where interests rarely converge, and securing commitments to ceasefire and cooperation are tricky. As conflict increasingly plays out online as well as on the ground, the mission is evolving towards cyber non-violence, the role of AI, and the ambition to reach 3 billion people without losing clarity of purpose. Jeremy, it's a real honour. Welcome to What the Luxe.
Thank you, Anant.
Jeremy, you began your career as an actor and filmmaker. Was there a moment you realised you wanted to try and change something on a global scale?
Yeah, there was. I mean, I found it difficult being young. It was tricky at home at times. I'm badly dyslexic. I was kind of bottom of the class and pretty much told I was stupid most of the time. So I kind of grew up, fairly troubled and confused by what was going on around me. And I sort of escaped that whole world by a stroke of luck, really. There were auditions for a show called Bugsy Malone that Mickey DeLenz was going to put on in the West End. Yeah. And I was at a special needs school at the time where I was living. And I said to my mum, could I go for this? And I saw it as my opportunity for freedom in a way. And she said yes. And so I did the first audition, and after 11 auditions, I ended up getting the lead role and played Bugsy Malone in the West End. I was 12, and that was it. I never looked back. I left Southampton, and then I started my journey in London, and I became a dancer, and then I joined the Royal Shakespeare Company, and I was doing all sorts of television programs, films. But I realised that that was all very interesting. But I knew there was more to my life than Shakespeare or The Bill or Bergerac or Lovejoy, Stendhal, whatever I was in. I just kind of like, I'm not kind of sure this is really doing it for me. So at that point, I thought, you know what, I want to use the camera to see if I can answer some questions for myself. Is humankind fundamentally evil? Is the destruction of the world inevitable? Should I have children? Is that a responsible thing to do? And so I really wanted to kind of ask some questions about, why humans behave the way they do towards each other in our homes, in schools, communities and places of work, and of course in the wider world. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to make a film about peace. I'd been making some really dark films prior to that. Nobody was purchasing them. They were just way too dark. But I thought I'll make a film about peace. And then I realised there was no day of peace. Through the exploration of what would a film about peace look like, where I'd answer questions for myself, I then realised there was no day of peace. And that's when I had my idea. I wanted to see if I could make a film about trying to establish the first ever day of peace, the first ever day of ceasefire and non-violence with a fixed calendar date. Could we create that through the making of a film? And I began the journey, and we travelled the world, and we had no money. British Airways would give the flights free, and somebody was doing the dry cleaning, and somebody would give a car, and everyone was working for nothing. And it was just this incredible journey where suddenly, I was meeting Mandela and Kofi Annan and Mary Robinson and Oscar Arias and Shimon Peres and, Amre Musa and, in Somalia. I mean, I've just traveled 162 countries, right, in the last 26 years. So, before I knew it, I was in front of everyone. The idea was really capturing everyone's imagination. And then I'm delighted that Oscar Arias, former president of Costa Rica and Nobel Peace Prize winner, and the British government, Costa Rica and the UK, put the idea forward to the United Nations General Assembly on the 7th of September 2001, and the entire world voted unanimously that the 21st of September would be the day of peace. It would be the day of ceasefire and non-violence, and mission accomplished.
It's kind of incredible. So the first version of September the 21st wasn't a prototype. It was fairly fully fledged.
How do you mean?
Well, it was like you got everyone on board for this first day of peace. It wasn't like a sort of dry run. It was all out.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was, you're absolutely right. I see exactly what you mean. It was, it was incredible. I mean, like, there we are. It was unanimous. And it was amazing that on the 7th of September 2001, as I just mentioned, the vote went through. Kofi Annan invited me to the United Nations on the morning of the 11th of September 2001. And I was there at the United Nations.
What stopped in that first year?
Well, on that day,
Yeah.
the planes hit the building. The World Trade Center. Right? I was in New York. We were waiting to announce that the Day of Peace had been created. And of course, the tragedy happened. And the announcement was never made. And of course, it was a terribly dark moment for obviously people in New York, for the world, for everyone. I mean, it was just unbelievable. But in that moment, I realized, like, this is exactly why we have to continue. The first ever day of ceasefire and non-violence with a fixed calendar date would, of course, be in 2002. And we put on an amazing show with Jimmy Cliff and Dave Stewart and Maxi Jazz from Faithless and, many others. It was incredible. And that was the end of my first documentary, Peace One Day.
Did you find behaviourally it was easier to sell a specific date than a concept of peace?
Yeah, I think, it is. I mean, I think it's a little bit like your birthday. You have a day and we all go, oh, it's Anant's birthday. And we're going to meet at your place and we're going to celebrate. Simple, really simple. So if we're going to lift the level of consciousness around the fundamental issues that humanity faces, then it's a really good call to have a starting point for that action. If we want to stop fighting, if we want to stop the fighting in our homes, schools, communities, places of work, and between countries, then we should have a moment where we say, that's the ceasefire day. That's why I went to Afghanistan, to see if I could get the Taliban to agree not to kill or kidnap anybody on the day. And because we had a day, we were able to focus NATO, ISAF, Karzai, everyone, UN agencies, UNAMA, the Taliban, to say, okay, this is the day. We're going to hold a ceasefire on this day. And as a consequence of that, we're going to be able to bring, thousands of vaccinators into areas that you couldn't normally go, to give 1.4 million children a polio vaccination. We did that. I made a film called The Day After Peace. It was extraordinary and incredible. And it was because we had the day, a fixed moment, a focus, for a moment of unity, standing as one, separate from politics and religion. That's what we need. We need that moment. We need a moment of hope. And out of that hope comes strength. And out of that strength comes a belief that we can be in this together, irrespective of our politics or our religion. Humanity must come together, particularly now. We are spiraling out of control now. It's got to stop.
What's your view on now versus before?
Mate, I mean, where we are now is just tragic. It's tragic.
Can I actually, I just want to ask more specifically that question, because I feel news cycles can focus on what seems to suit the news cycle at times. Call me cynical for saying that. But you are in a position where you are aware of universal strife, at a global scale. And so my question, the reason I ask this question is, do things always seem like they're worse than they've ever been in moments where there's obvious anguish? Or is it a constant and quite prevalent source of sort of disdain with the things that are wrong in the world?
Yeah. Last year was the most violent year since the Second World War. Those are the facts. And so I think that answers your question, sadly, Anant.
Yeah.
The violence is increasing. The way in which we are treating our planet and the way in which we are treating each other. And perfectly well, walking around London at the moment, things have changed. The way in which we're all looking at each other, it's different. And it's really sad. And that's happening all over the world. And it really needs to change. But those are the facts. I mean, I was in Japan last year in November, receiving the Goi Peace Prize, which Gorbachev and Jane Goodall and and many others, Bill Gates, Deepak Chopra, had all received, and it was an incredible moment. I was there. It's 80 years since the war ended. My grandfather was a Japanese prisoner of war, in Nagasaki, and so it was incredible to be in this location, which was so related to my family, and be talking about the fact that this was the most violent year since the Second World War in a place that had 2 nuclear bombs dropped on it. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's kind of, we're definitely living in an incredibly difficult time. But of course, there's hope. Things can change. I get up every day, to put as much constructive narrative out, as indeed you are doing through your podcast. That I hope informs, inspires, and engages people towards action that we can measure. Now's the time and for every individual to do all they can to contribute to a more peaceful and sustainable world. And there is so much that we can all do, irrespective of how our lives are, whether it's protecting resources, which is ultimately peace building. You can't have peace without sustainability. You can't have sustainability without peace. We can all do so much. Particularly, I'd love people to remember the 21st of September, put it in their diaries, bring their families together, bring their work colleagues together, tell the teachers, use the free education resources, etc., etc.
What's it like when you have to sit across a table and have a conversation with someone that weaponizes hate, where you've seen the impact of what that's done in a war-torn area?
Look, I think wherever you are or whoever you're sitting in front of, everyone has the ability to have done terrible things. Whether it's with their mobile phones or whether it's with a weapon, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or whether it's, verbally. I mean, like, there is a lot of hatred in the world, and there's a lot of compassion too. There's a lot of love as well. And so, I don't sit there and look at anybody thinking about what happened in the past.
Yeah.
I'm looking at you today thinking, look at what we're doing right now. Look at what you're doing with your podcast. You know what I mean? Like, and now let's do something constructive together. And through this, we're raising awareness of a day, and an opportunity for people to become a part of the peace process by the observation of the 21st September. So, I don't judge, I don't blame, I don't shame, I don't ridicule. I'm not interested in that. If somebody wants to sit around this table and talk about peace and something that's constructive moving forward, then that's what we need to do. Because if I'm sat in front of the table with you thinking about what you did yesterday, where are we going? We're going to go nowhere. So my whole approach has always been, if somebody wants to sit around the table and talk about something really constructive on the 21st of September, which is working towards a more peaceful and sustainable world, then we should do that.
Have you consciously thought about building Peace One Day as a sort of brand?
No. I mean, it's just naturally happened, Anant, because of course, I've been on the road 26 years. And, Peace One Day's been around a while now. Once we'd created a day of peace and once we proved it could work in Afghanistan and the fighting stopped, I then wanted to institutionalise the day. You talk about branding. Well, I mean, look, McKinsey's taught me this kind of work, only because they were measuring things for us, pro bono, by the way, is that brands or products are sold because there's a billboard on the side of the road that people are exposed to. Whoever's exposed to it, a portion of those people remember it. And then a portion of those people who remember it purchase it. That's the method, isn't it? That's the method of how it all works. So the same works with me. You expose people to the fact that the 21st of September is a day of peace. Some people remember that it's the day of peace, and some people are going to reach out. They're going to be less violent. I mean, the 21st September is a day where more people think about peace than any other day of the year. Fact. And it's also the day with the greatest reduction of violent deaths. Fact. Incredible. And so that's the building of a brand. I mean, for me to get the message out there in a major way, we put the Peace One Day logo on the side of cans of Coke. For us to get the message out there in a major way, Puma and Adidas made peace on the day of peace for the first time in their history. We brought McDonald's and Burger King together to end the beef wars. The McWhopper campaign, massive. We did a campaign with Unilever, with Lynx Act Global, huge across the entire world, Make Love Not War. We opened the Super Bowl with that commercial. So, we have worked with big brands, with big artists, Elton John in Wembley and Lenny Kravitz in Paris and Akon in Congo, in Goma, shut the international airport down. I mean, we have done a lot of stuff to make sure that people find out that the 21st of September is an opportunity for them to become part of the peace process. We need to unite. We need to come together as a world now more than ever before, because your children and my children, they need to go, Dad, it's Peace Day today. And we go, yeah. And they go, this is beautiful, Dad. We had an amazing day at school. And they feel a sense of hope rather than the darkness that they feel in relation to hearing the word nuclear wars or seeing, the racism growing or the discussion around the destruction of this beautiful environment that we live in. That is sad. I don't want my daughter hearing that. I don't want it, mate. So we have to work incredibly hard now and put as much constructive narrative into the world as we can to change things. And that's what I do every day with the help of many, many people across the 26 years.
You sat across the table from heads of state, military leaders, and global brands. How do you build trust in rooms where interests don't naturally align?
Truth is everything, right?
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. I can only tell my truth. And I think that if you look people in the eyes without, judging them for who they might be or what they might have done, like let's just look at each other and have a truthful conversation about something really constructive that inspires people and creates hope. That's what it's all about. And I think that whoever you meet, when you're really in that place of kind of truth and connection, something magical can happen. I mean, I do have faith in human beings.
Yeah.
I do think there's really beautiful things that go on through art, through, literature, construction, music. Humans do have the ability to be very special and very beautiful. And I want to hold on to that, as difficult as that is.
What have you learned about human nature from the work that you do?
Look, I mean, you've only got to look at the evolution of humanity, right? You've got to say, okay, look, if you're a gardener and you've got a garden, we look at the garden and we go, oh yeah, this is really beautiful. What an amazing thing that you've created. Look at it, the beautiful trees and the lawns, and wonderful. You look at where we are. If you looked at this as the garden we've created, it's not a good thing. I mean, we're just destroying it. And it's just tragic. The seas, the air, the land. Look what we're doing to it. And look at what we're doing to each other. Look at the increase of violence and all the things that we've discussed. I mean, that's what I've learned about the human. I mean, like, you only have to look at the evidence. You don't have to be philosophical about it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Why do you think things have become worse?
It's just what we are. It's how we're built. You know what I mean? I mean, you can have a kind of philosophical, intellectual conversation about, oh yeah, how it really should be. And I think that's, it's one way why, human beings can cope with being human. Is the idea that they might be able to save it, right? Otherwise, how do you cope? What are you going to tell your children? I mean, so, you know what I mean? Like, I think, we've got to face the facts. Now, I actually want to believe that through storytelling, through constructive narrative, the status quo can change. I mean, throughout history it has, whether it's votes or terrible things that have happened over the years where things were abolished and changed throughout history, that things do change. And that's because people on the peripheral, people like yourself, who's running a podcast, putting out information and inviting me to speak here today, the center changes because of people talking on the peripheral. And so I have to believe, in order to get up every day and make sense of my life and my existence, that things can change and can be different. Otherwise, I would really struggle.
Conflict has started playing out online as well as on the ground. And how has that changed your mission?
I think that technology has just changed everything. Listen, look, 26 years ago, I began Peace One Day at Shakespeare's Globe Theatre with Sir Mark Rylance, who was running the Globe at the time, and from Big Friendly Giant and Bridge of Spies and many other wonderful films. Mark's been an ambassador with me for years and years. Same as, Peace One Day ambassador Jude Law, who's, been by my side for a very, very long time, and many, many others like Dave Stewart of the Eurythmics and so on and so forth. So like when we started out, there wasn't, I remember buying a computer in 98 for the first time in my life. I mean, of course, they'd been around a long time before that, but you know what I mean? Like, it was just, there was, we weren't on Facebook or any of this stuff. I think Facebook was created in 1999. I mean, don't quote me on that, but you know what I mean? Like, it was all just beginning. So when we were campaigning, we were writing letters, we were posting them, we were, doing all sorts of things, putting billboards on the sides of vans and free and getting them to drive around London. And you're thinking like, oh wow, we'd really done it. We were doing shows at the Royal Albert Hall or Brixton Academy or whatever it might have been, going, wow, yeah, we just 5,000 people have just found out about what's going on, and we were like thrilled, and that maybe a newspaper might write about it. Those were the days of campaigning, and of course they're very, very different now. 3 billion people, by the way, are now aware that the 21st September is a day of peace. That's the day I said to you, we're more people thinking about peace than any other day of the year, and there's the greatest reduction of violent deaths on any given day as a consequence of this massive movement of people. There were 9 billion movements in 24 hours of the 2 words peace day last year. 9 billion movements. This is astonishing. And so there you go, right? The technology moving this word peace around on the day of peace in an unbelievable way, where, you know, young people were in schools and families were getting together and people were saying sorry and violence was decreasing. So, you know, technology has that ability to really, you know, really push it out there in a big way. And it's very, very exciting. And of course, there's the other side of it, you know, where obviously people can use it for, you know, to hate and to confuse and misinformation, disinformation, you know, I mean, so, but, you know, that's life. There's always the yin and yang, right? There's always the good and the dark. So
is there a role AI plays in this mission for peace?
Yeah, I think there definitely is. I mean, look, again, with AI, we know that there's a dark side to it, but there's also a side that's incredibly creative and very interesting.
Yeah.
And so, of course, I focus massively on that. You know, the idea that I can put an education resource that's free into every language of the world at the click of a button is mind-blowing. I wasn't able to do that, Anant, many years ago because it's just too expensive. You know, Peace One Day's always struggled financially. I mean, one of the greatest challenges I face on a daily basis and spend 60-70% of my time is wondering how we can just keep the lights on and pay some wages at the end of the month. And that's a kind of an obvious statement, right?
Yeah.
We're living in a violent world, so, you know, peace is underfunded. The peacemakers are underfunded. But again, that's just part of the climb.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to make a difference with peace, it's not a pretty ride. It's hard work constantly in order to be able to try to do it. This is not pleasant.
What sorts of things could brands do to help that are non-financial?
Just tell everyone it's the 21st of September. You imagine there's a shop that you work with. You work with brands. I bet some of them are like got shops on the high street, right? Is that true?
Yeah.
Great. Well, that big window on the high street, put Peace Day. Put a big, beautiful sign going Peace Day with your, you know, products or whatever you need to do. Raise awareness of it. You know, wonderful. Tell the workforce. Beautiful that the workforce is united on a day, you know, the 21st September, the day of ceasefire and non-violence of Peace Day. So much that they can do, which has nothing to do with money. Equally, they can ring us up and go, we'd love to help you with your education, or we'd love to, you know, put on a show with you or whatever.
Yeah. Well, what are some of your favourite projects and initiatives that you've found personally the most rewarding over your 26-year journey?
Yeah, there's so many amazing things in it. I mean, like, it has been an incredible ride, you know, being in Somalia and seeing things that I never really knew existed, which, you know, just went to the very, very core of me and, you know, lit a fire inside of me that made sure I was just never, ever going to give up, you know, on behalf of the photographs that I took. And then I walked away and I knew they couldn't. And I said to myself really deeply, you know, if I'm walking away, Jeremy, then you must never give up, because you can't continue to do this job. Take that photo and then just, you know, try to sell your movie and that be that. No way. Something took over. Once I'd seen enough, it was like, this is my destiny. I'm just going to spend the rest of my life trying to promote the manifestation of a more peaceful and sustainable world. No question about it. So, you know, when you say what moments have you seen, it's moments like that all over the world where I've seen people that were in situations which are completely unfair and totally unacceptable. Those are the things that I remember most. However, of course, you know, being in Afghanistan and, you know, being involved in a process that leads to the Taliban agreeing not to kill or kidnap anybody and what we had to go through and who we were with in order to make that happen was mind-blowing. You know, being at the United Nations General Assembly and seeing the world vote for the creation of a day of peace with a fixed calendar date was mind-blowing, you know, being in Japan, receiving the Goi Peace Prize, you know, in the very location that my grandfather was at 80 years ago, where a nuclear bomb was dropped, and I was there in his name, receiving this award, right, in a way, you know, on behalf of the thousands of people who helped me. That was an incredible moment. You know, being with Elton John in Wembley, you know, seeing Elton John sing for Peace Day, you know, with Jude and others. Oh, mind-blowing. I mean, like, there's just so many incredible memories. You know, being with Kofi Annan, being with Nelson Mandela, being with Mary Robinson, you know what I mean? Being with, you know, Angelina Jolie and premiering the film in New York. I mean, it just goes on and on.
Was Jude Law one of the more formative sort of celebrity figures who got involved in the movement?
Yeah, I mean, Jude Law as an artist is just an incredible human being. I mean, I've known him for a very long time, right? He's been on the road with me, and he's just, whether we were in Afghanistan or whether we were in the Democratic Republic of Congo in the East, in Goma, these are not, these are pretty tricky places to go, right? If you're Jude Law, and and he's just there for me, 100%, doing everything that he can to make sure that the day has been a success. I mean, I honestly don't think actually I'd have made it through if Jude hadn't done what he'd done.
Has he been quite instrumental in bringing on other people of influence?
Hugely.
I mean,
right. I mean, of course, right. I mean, what Jude was there for Peace One Day in the most astonishing way. Incredible man. I mean, really, and an amazing artist and producer.
Yeah,
he's something else. The guy.
How's the whole thing evolved over the last couple of decades?
Well, it's evolved in lots of ways, in as much as, the first part of the process was creating a day of peace. The second part of the process was proving that a ceasefire could happen in a complex place like Afghanistan. The third part of the process was making sure that 3 billion people were fully aware of the day, so that you're, decreasing violence in a major way. The next part of this process, has been all about me, utilising other days. I'm going to produce the content for World Food Day in October. We're producing content for Mental Health Day. You can't have world peace if we don't have peace of mind. We can't have peace if we don't protect food. We can't have peace if we don't protect the climate. So, I'm putting a lot of constructive narrative around, education, anti-racism, AI, climate, peace, food, mental health, violence against women. I mean, we're branching out into all of those different areas.
Yeah.
Because they're all fundamental to peace breaking out. You've got to look at all sorts of issues: justice, equality, diversity, inclusion. If there's no justice, there's no peace. If there's no equality, there's no peace.
Yeah. What are the frustrations that you think prevent how aid is delivered being as effective as it might be?
Listen, I think the issue for anybody who is delivering anything, for all of them, it's all about their funding. Budgets are just being slashed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, they really are. And of course, it's incredibly difficult to carry out humanitarian activity when you don't have the resources, at whatever scale that is. The reason why we had the most violent year since the Second World War in 80 years last year is because of the lack of investment in peace. I was receiving the Goya Peace Prize. Well, they rang me. I didn't ring them saying, we'd like to give you this prize. And I was thinking to myself as I got it, I was like, oh my God, this is a really important prize to get, but we're so weak. And that yet we've been selected. And then as I thought about that deeply, I was thinking, well, yeah, kind of makes sense, because the peace process is so weak. The peacemakers are so weak. Those delivering aid are so weak because of the lack of investment. It's going the wrong way, but that's how it is. And you've got to go, okay, that's how it is. What can we do to change this? And I think the answer lies in education. If you said to me, all right, of everything that you've ever learned, what have you really learned? And I've learned, well, I don't think adults are going to change and give up the money that they've got. Right? It's a survival thing going on, and I respect it and I understand it, and I wouldn't be rude about anybody who's doing all of that sort of thing, just surviving.
Yeah.
You've got to survive. You've got to look after your kids. I get it. But is it possible that we could turn this most violent year that we just had in 80 years last year around and start going the other way? And what would be the key to that happening? Well, I'm just a simple guy, uneducated, do you know what I mean? But I would say to you, we have to equip young people with the appropriate skills to be able to take on the great challenges of today. We need young people to be the driving force behind the vision of a united and sustainable world. We need to instill in them that values and purpose and a sense of being able to change the world is absolutely critical, and across an entire generation of the world. And we might, if we do that, see a reversal of this current trend that's taking place. But I truly believe that's the only way.
This seems like a slightly stupid question to ask, but I'd like to ask it anyway. And it is this: what most concerns you about the world we're leaving the next generation?
Well, listen, I've got a young girl, so I worry, for her, how things are in the present trend. We are moving into a very dark period, as of course you realise. And that's a worry. That's tragic, really. Because, of course, human beings can be really beautiful and compassionate and empathetic and really special. and do the most incredible things, art, music, literature. It's tragic that the current trajectory is as it is, and it worries me. But, things can be different and it can change, and I believe it will, and I have to believe it will, otherwise I won't be able to get up.
What do you think are the biggest risks in the next decade?
I think everything that we're seeing right now, the way in which people are communicating, the way in which people are making up a kind of a new truth to suit what they want. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's crazy. It's pretty clear. What's worrying me is what is happening, the current trajectory, the way in which we're behaving. So it's all there for us to see. And I think that what I'm thinking about, and what we've been talking about is it can be different. I think storytelling, podcasts, filmmaking, literature, technology can also turn things around.
I think the power of good storytelling rather than cheap headlines is grossly undervalued. The power of a story to move people, change their frame of reference and how they think about things is undervalued. There's so much content and it's all designed to provide the punchline without the joke, not to make light of a serious subject, but actually a good story that seduces you in and has a point of tension. People have enough attention for that story. Unfortunately, we just don't reward that sort of story, and so we don't surface it.
Yeah. I think you're completely right. Storytelling is critical to humanity's survival. The only reason anybody changes their behavior is because of a story that they've heard. Those are the facts. So, whether it's a story that a parent is saying to their child or a teacher is saying to the class, or you as a broadcaster are communicating to thousands of people. This is where it's at. Storytelling is where it's at. Storytelling is the gateway to humanity's survival. There's no question about that.
What do you think about the link between the educational systems and your message?
Listen, we've worked in the classroom for over 20 years. The first thing that I did when I launched Peace One Day at Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, in 1999, was immediately go on the road, with the crew, and we were in schools across England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, just trying to understand what young people felt about this idea. And how they were coping with everything that was going on. So, and we've put education resources in probably 140 countries now. Free, being used by well over 40,000 teachers across those countries at the moment, with a real agenda to scale that as much as we possibly can over the next few years. So, education, young people, providing free resources that are appropriate in order to support them to become the driving force behind a peaceful and sustainable world is critically important.
What's the most exciting thing for you that you're doing kind of over the next couple of years?
Well, the whole journey is exciting. I want to make my third feature film on this subject, and so that's probably what's exciting me most. Right, I want to tell a story about where the world is at from what I've learned and from the 26 years of journeying. So I'm really looking forward to doing that. I'm also going to write a book. I wrote a book for Penguin, for a children's book, The Making of World Peace Day, which was an incredible thing to do with Penguin North America. But I want to write another book about the entire journey and everything that I think and feel about humans and the way in which we're behaving. So that'll be a pretty truthful look. I will share a lot in that book that I've never shared before, obviously. So I've been working on that for a little while, and that's really exciting to me. But I won't release that until the time's right. That could be a few years away, or we'll see. Just to kind of be, setting up a new entity for our education work is really exciting to me. The idea of us being able to put free resources in all the schools of the world, centered around the manifestation of a more peaceful world is very, very exciting. So look, every day is incredible. I feel very lucky to be, on this journey and to be creative and be contributing through storytelling.
Can I ask a question? So what I think is interesting about Peace Day, and when you create room within yourself to just stop for a moment and reflect, often the conclusion is sort of peace, or a peaceful state of mind. I go and do Vipassana every year, and it's amazing how quickly it is to remodel your priorities, get yourself out of a muddle,
Yeah.
Move yourself from your mind to your body.
Yeah.
Linked to that, did violence at a global scale go up or down during COVID when everyone stopped and the air seemed to clear itself for a moment despite the tragedy happening on the ground?
I mean, we'd probably have to look at the data yourself, but as I understand it, I think there was an increase of violence going on in the home as a consequence of people being stuck at home.
Yeah.
And drinking and various things, right? I think there's a lot of information out there, I think, on that data being a very, very difficult time for people.
Yeah.
But obviously on the streets it was different because there was no one on the streets.
Yeah.
But I think what was going on in the home was pretty tragic for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it's a funny question, that one, isn't it? Because like clearly on a global stage there were fewer wars, but at a micro level, you were either in a good situation or in a bad situation.
Yeah,
if you happen to be in a good situation, suddenly sort of, nature, freedom, being untethered from technology, the routine and rhythms of working life. If you were in a good situation, it was a wonderful. Otherwise, you're a caged animal. It's a terrible situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that was a fascinating period. And in fact, I actually came out of that with real hope that, at the time I was kind of thinking, this is really interesting how everyone's trying to protect each other, separate from those who were, caught in the crossfire in their homes. It was a period and then it was over and then we got back to the way in which we've been doing things. But, we keep on going, right? We never give up. I mean, that's what it's all about.
Jeremy, I'd just like to thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast and to ask you to let those who are listening know how they can help, be they brands or individuals, and to make it easy for them to do something.
Well, Anant, firstly, I want to thank you and your podcast, which is amazing, for helping raise awareness of Peace Day and the work of Peace One Day. That's very kind of you, and I've really enjoyed being with you. So thank you. I mean, in terms of people helping, look, I'm on LinkedIn, Jeremy Gilley, MBE, LinkedIn. Great, connect with me. Let's have a conversation. And we use all different kinds of social media. I think there's some people who say, people just liking things, doesn't really make a difference. Let me tell you, it really does.
Yeah.
I mean, so we use social media, whether it's Peace One Day or Jeremy Gilley, across absolutely everything. Whatever your chosen platform is, please support us. Like the stuff. Loads of shows coming up with AI and climate and peace and mental health and food and violence against women, etc., etc. So please, get behind our work. If you're a brand and a company and you want to do something and collaborate, please reach out to us. We work with corporations all the time, and it's the way in which we can survive. So building something bespoke together, which will inspire your workforce and your consumers and your B2B, please reach out, because it's really special and it'll be an experience that everyone will love. But most importantly, remember that the 21st of September is a day of peace. Bring your family, bring your friends together and have a beautiful day.
Jeremy, thank you.
Thank you.